This is what's wild in New Hampshire. Today is October 3rd, 2023, and I'm at New Hampshire Audubon. There's the McLean Center right over there. So I'm here with senior biologist, I would guess, senior biologist Chris Martin. Chris, we're talking birds today, as we always do, and I think you've got some awesome information you're going to tell us about today, and I'll let you choose where you start, because there's a lot of good stuff, and it probably doesn't matter where you start because a lot of it's good.
Well, I've had the good pleasure of working for over 30 years with birds of prey in New Hampshire, and generally the stories have been good because we've put a lot of resources into recovery efforts, not just New Hampshire Audubon, but the State Fish and Game Department and the Federal Fish and Wildlife Service and other partners. So we put a lot of resources into recovering those populations, and generally the story is good, at least in 2 out of the 3 cases.
Right.
What I want to tell you about. The one that everybody's, I think, quite familiar with now is the recovery and the resurgence of the bald eagle. We passed 100 territorial pairs of bald eagles this year.
Unbelievable. You predicted last year it probably would, and you were right.
We passed 100, but what's interesting is just 25 years ago, we were all excited because we found the second nesting pair in the state.
Wow.
25 years ago.
And
now we've got over 100 pairs.
Wow.
And we're on track to pass 1,000 young fledged in that
time. Wow.
Next year.
All right. Wow.
It's quite likely we will.
Yeah.
So
wow.
That's a remarkable change.
In a sense, 1,000 eagles fledged over that 25-year period, or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. Any sense of where those eagles have ended up, the ones that have fledged?
They've ended up in lots of places. We put ID bands on a number of them. We've put satellite transmitters on a few of them, and that helps us track where they go. These are the ID bands that we put on eagles.
All right, look at that.
Standard federal band and a color band.
I've got huge fingers.
There you go. It almost fits.
Almost fits. Oh yeah.
You
got to have a band. I banded songbirds when I was younger, and they weren't that size.
Eagles have big legs.
Yeah,
and these codes let us, working with wildlife photographers, for example, get IDs on these birds.
Even though you don't have to have them in hand. Yeah. You can see them from a distance.
Some of them we've documented being well over 20 years of age.
Really? Wow.
So some of them date back to those very early years of recovery.
Really? So, wow. Any flyers that ended up, I don't know, somewhere in the Midwest?
No, they've all been New York, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Maine,
all right,
and vice versa. We've gotten birds from those states.
Right.
Very few from Canada.
Okay.
And you get beyond
so they're basically New England, New York birds.
Yeah, beyond that, it's hard. We don't get very many from those places that we're aware of.
Right,
tomorrow we could get a band report of somebody new.
Oh yeah.
So,
so
anyway, the eagle work has been fascinating to follow this population recovering. They continue to nest closer and closer to each other. We have 5 pairs on Great Bay now.
Wow.
If you count Little Bay and the rivers.
Yes. Yeah.
And several other large lakes that have multiple pairs, including Winnipesaukee, which has a dozen now.
A dozen nests around Winnipesaukee. Who would have figured?
Basically every bay and really big island has
Wow. So. Impressive. Unbelievable. Yeah. And I could look up in the summertime from my house and see eagles going over the last 2 summers. Prior to that, you had to go look for eagles. Now eagles are finding you.
Well, and most teenagers don't know a time when we didn't have a good number of eagles.
Okay. There you go.
Us old timers.
Yep.
We remember when it was
Nest
hard
1.
to find them. Yeah.
Nest 0 for many years, actually.
For about 40 years. Yeah.
Yeah, about 40 years, no nests. Wow.
Yeah.
So, record number of pairs.
Yeah. Let me show you this.
Yeah.
This is our chart for the last.
Right. Let's take a look at it. I'll
30
get my
years
head
or
out of
so.
the shadow. Wow.
Hopefully,
look at that.
All the numbers are going up.
Up.
Territorial pairs and active nests and number of young produced.
Wow.
They've all been going up. We're doubling our population about every 6 or 7 years.
Wow.
So you can imagine where that puts us in 2030.
Right.
If we double again.
Wow.
So
awesome eagle news.
As a population biologist, I'm really interested in seeing when those curves begin to flatten out and indicate that we've reached carrying.
When the eagles have decided they have enough neighbors.
Well, you get into a place where you've got disturbance by neighboring pairs,
right,
among other things.
Yeah.
and they are nesting in less and less suitable spots.
Right.
And so their success is less.
Right.
So we shall see.
Yep.
That's the point of continuing to track them, even after they're off our state threatened
Okay.
list.
Nice.
So.
Bird number 2.
Okay, let's talk about peregrines. And I
Peregrine.
got leg bands for you again.
Oh boy.
Our peregrine falcon population is nowhere near as abundant as our eagle population. It probably never will be.
Right.
But we have an increasing number of pairs that nest in urban sites, in addition to our cliff nesting pairs. We have
Which is how it was started off.
Yeah. Franconia Notch was the first nesting pair in the in New England.
I was
at a
there
wild
when
site.
John Lanier
Yeah.
spotted that first.
Yeah, and we've
Pair
had them
nesting.
there every year since. So
Yep.
it's pretty
Nice.
neat. But they're nesting on, with help, if we put up boxes or trays, they're
Okay.
nesting on power plant smokestacks, they're nesting on building ledges, they're nesting under and on top of interstate highway bridges
Wow.
in various places. And
All the places that pigeons hang out.
you're exactly right.
You don't have to chase dinner when you're looking at it down the other end of the girder.
So peregrines aren't as big as eagles, and it's
Yeah.
a lot more work to monitor them because you don't have a 6-foot wingspan target. There you go.
So there we go.
Yeah, right inside. You can't put that on.
You can fit them inside. Whoops.
You won't be able to put that on your finger.
All right.
Can't do it, so we'll get to that. But we've had some really interesting developments with peregrines. I work with recreational climbers and folks managing some of the favorite places to
Okay.
go rock climbing.
Yep.
And we're able to use their assistance when we put ID bands on some of these birds.
Okay.
We're not putting bands on nearly the percentage of peregrine chicks that we used to
Okay.
when there were only a dozen.
All right.
Because it's a very time
Got to get
consuming
up there,
process.
get up to them, and get back down safely.
And you have to know when the right time to go is.
Okay. All right.
But some of our surrounding states are still going through great lengths to ban their peregrines,
Okay.
and we come across those birds with some frequency
Oh,
too.
really? So
I
how many
just want
pairs
to
do we
mention.
have?
I want to mention one site. Yeah, we
Okay.
have this year we had 29 active nest sites,
29.
Yeah,
That's a big bump from last
and
year, isn't it?
27 of those had pairs.
Wow.
And we topped, where's my chart here? We topped our record high for a number of chicks this year, just
Wow.
barely.
All right.
We now have 48
Let me get my head out of
we
the
had
way, get out of the
48
shade.
chicks this year, and that was the most ever, as you can see in this
Okay.
corner here.
Wow.
This population's been increasing at a fairly steady but slow rate,
All right.
not like the eagles charging.
So how many fledged this year?
We had 48 fledged,
48
Yeah.
fledged. Wow.
and they were all over the state, from Dixville Notch down to I-95 bridge in Portsmouth Kittery.
Who'd have thought?
Yeah.
It's so amazing to see how animals are adaptable
Yeah,
when they have some numbers to use.
yeah. They are incredible bird hunters, and it doesn't matter if it's a brown thrasher or a blackbird or a flicker or a pigeon or a dove. Whatever's abundant. If they're in farmland, they usually go after pigeons and doves.
Yep. Easy
They're
to
in
catch.
cities, it's oftentimes starlings,
Yep.
as
Oh,
well
yeah.
as pigeons.
Yep.
So, and they're really good parents. They defend their nests very strongly against any
aggressively, yep.
potential predators.
Nice.
And
So they're not getting picked off.
we don't have in the case of eagles, we have an awful lot of issues with mortality related to roadkill
Okay.
consumption by the eagles,
Yep. All right.
and
so
the eagles are then in danger because
Yep.
they're on the road edge and they don't take off by going straight up in the air.
Yep. They can't. Those wings.
So we have very few cases where we find injured peregrines. I think a lot of them may die in places that we just don't
Okay.
ever discover.
Yep. All right.
But they're remarkable birds, and
Where do they
great to
winter?
follow 'em. Most of our breeding eagles and breeding falcons winter close by.
Okay.
Some on their breeding territory.
So even the falcons don't move very far.
Probably
Wow.
50% of the peregrines seem to move, but they don't move 1,000 miles.
Okay.
The peregrines that you hear about going several thousand miles are coming from the Arctic and
Okay.
going to the tropics.
Okay.
The northeast peregrines only move 300 or 400 miles
Okay.
to the mid-Atlantic, for example,
All right.
to Chesapeake Bay or
Yep.
something
Okay.
like that. Not moving very far, and
Yep.
they're oftentimes coming back by middle of February.
Okay.
So
Wow.
they don't spend too long away.
Yep, yep.
So, I just wanted to mention one thing going back to eagles is we had the opportunity this year to work with biologists from a group called Biodiversity Research Institute,
Okay.
headquartered near Portland, Maine, and we accessed 4 eagle nests and not only put bands on 8 chicks, but we also worked with them to get blood and feather samples. They're going
Okay.
to test for PFAS
Ah,
and other toxins.
same thing. The LPC, Loon
Mhm.
Preservation Center, is doing the same thing. Yep.
And since peregrines, or since eagles are fish eaters,
Yep.
and they're getting them from a lot of our major rivers,
Yep.
it has direct implications for us.
Absolutely. And let's hope Mercury's down.
Yeah, but we continue to have new toxins to
Yep.
be concerned about.
Wow.
So just wanted to mention that. Then the other species that I've been following intermittently until the last few years is probably one of our rarest raptors, daytime raptors at least, and that's the northern harrier.
Yep.
A bird that was probably found 80 to 100 years ago in numbers like 40 or 50 pairs. But our habitat for them has changed in a lot of ways in the last
Farms.
30 or 40 years. Farms get smaller and smaller, it seems
Yep,
like,
yep.
and a lot of the land becomes developed into subdivisions. Or, believe it or not, a lot of it actually grows back to trees. And that's not good for northern harriers.
Nope.
They're ground nesters. They nest in open areas close to hayfields, but not necessarily in the hayfield,
Okay.
and close to marshes.
Okay.
So you've got
Another
that
name for him
shrub.
is marsh hawk. And the
Yeah,
old name,
marsh
marsh
hawk
hawk.
is the old name.
Yep.
And so this scrub habitat, the
Okay.
stuff that stays brushy,
Okay.
is the kind of place that they'll find a dry spot inside of and
Okay.
put their nest there. But it's on the ground. So if we have heavy rains like
I
we
was
had
going to say, I was
this
just
year,
going to say, this year was a rainy year.
June and July was awful.
Yep.
And we did a survey in August to see how many fledged young this year.
Yep.
It was centered in Coas County
Yep.
and mostly in the Colebrook area. And we were only able to confirm 3 continuingly active sites in
Okay.
August,
Wow.
2 of which had babies.
Okay.
But we only were able to confirm 4 chicks statewide
Wow.
this year.
Okay. Yep.
Last year, on the other hand, we had 15 young produced.
15.
Yeah,
Wow. What a
which
difference.
is the best
Yep,
year in the
yep,
last
yep.
5.
Well, we know we had a record wet summer here in New Hampshire.
Yeah.
And the
So our next step with that project, which we do with New Hampshire Fish and Game and with funding from other foundations as well, is to try to open up dialogue with some large landowners,
okay.
whether they be farmers or whether it be timber companies that have areas that are clear cutting and that will be open for a
Okay.
number of years
All
to
right.
try to manage those sites.
Sure.
Or manage them in rotations that
Okay.
allow for some harrier habitat to
Yep.
stay there all the time.
All right.
So, but this species is not trending in the right direction.
Right. Right.
And that's continues to be a challenge for
Yep.
us.
Right.
So,
Any other numbers? Anybody else?
well, those are the 3 that have
Yeah,
focused
that-
my
that
entire
you-
attention.
Right. Yeah.
We have been out of the osprey business for over 10 years.
Oh yeah, but you got to give me an osprey number.
Yeah. However, our partner and collaborator in the Lakes region, Ian McLeod, has continued to track
Yes, he has.
what is now over 30 nesting pairs in the Lakes region.
Wow.
And watch them very carefully. And so we get good data on the population and their productivity from him.
In that area.
But my best guess is that we're talking about 150 or more pairs statewide
Okay.
now. I'd love you to guess what the substrate, the nesting surface that the majority of these birds are nesting on. Now, the new pairs we find,
Okay.
what do you suppose they're nesting on?
Well, I would say power lines.
Power lines is a good guess, but it's actually cell towers.
Ah,
cell
yes,
towers
yes.
are a huge
Oh,
target
yeah, because
for
they
these
got
guys.
a lot of equipment up there. It'd be easy to stick it up,
It's
wouldn't
the
it?
highest thing around, and it has more support than power lines.
Yes.
usually.
Yep. Yep.
There are issues. but we continue to find more and more pairs on cell towers across the state. So
Interesting. Yeah, that makes sense, doesn't it? Sure does. Wow. Any sense on what happened out at the Owls this year? Do you have any
I don't have
talk here? No.
I don't have much that I can tell you about the Isles of Shoals. You know, Fish and Game continues to do their turn restoration. I know the numbers have been doing pretty well.
It was 2,000 or 3,000 nests, the last number I guess I heard. So we'll stick with that.
I'm wondering when we're going to find a bald eagle pair nesting on the Isles of Shoals, even though the trees aren't big.
Right.
I know they've encountered peregrine falcons intermittently out there, and I wonder when
they're going to use
birds. The lighthouse is in this site.
Ring the dinner bell. That's right.
Yeah.
Awesome. So a lot is happening. A lot of good stuff is happening. We got we got the harriers struggling,
and there's still a lot of room to work with our nocturnal raptors.
Oh yeah.
Not many people are working with owls. It's certainly not their breeding information. So
and our nighthawks, their numbers are not what they were, just based on my own experience over the last 50 years here in New Hampshire. It was.
And we're also worried about our grassland songbirds.
Okay.
Because there's sort of a general decline, and it may track the fact that grasslands are not what they used to be.
We're down to under 100 farms, 100 dairy farms. So if farms go away, the animals that live there go away too, don't they? So we keep working with landowners, keep up what we can, make habitat what we can, but a lot of good news here today, Chris. Appreciate your time here at New Hampshire Audubon. Great work by New Hampshire Audubon with a lot of partners. And we should mention volunteers. You know, if we don't mention volunteers, we're doing a disservice, because
exactly what
everybody runs on the volunteers.
Our volunteers do most of the monitoring for me with our raptor projects now.
There's a lot of wonderful volunteers that work for that help New Hampshire Audubon. Yes, they do. Very good. Thank you very much, Chris. All right, we're back. A beautiful Tuesday afternoon here at the McLean Center. Wonderful and great news. Thank you very much, Chris. This is Wildlife Biologist Eric Orr for What's Wild in New Hampshire.